Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This is Langley Outdoors Academy, the place where we not only talk about what's going on in the gun world, but also how we're going to fix it together. And guys, I have great news. This is breaking. This is coming from the People's Republic of China itself. We have a gun problem in the United States, and we should do something to fix our human rights violations because of our gun love. You can't make this up. Everything will be linked in the description box below, and I cannot wait to hear from you guys on this one because I know this is going to be fun. Now, if you are new or you are a returning viewer, please consider hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and making sure that notification bell is on. We need as many people as we can to get in the fold, in the trenches with us, to pass the blessing on of the Second Amendment. And thank you so much in advance for your consideration. Now, the content today is brought to you by USCCA, and USCCA is not only preparation for if the worst thing possible happens, and they have an answer for you if that occurs, it's also training and education. They're a one-stop shop, and they've got a little video they want you to check out, which points to a longer video to find out more if you are interested. It's linked in the description box below, and let's hit it really quick.
The United States Concealed Carry Association was born, and since then, their membership has grown to nearly 700,000 and counting. Life-saving education, industry-leading training, and self-defense liability insurance are the three focal points of the United States Concealed Carry Association. But what is USCCA? And who are the people behind it? This summer, Go Films was invited to find out who they are and how they're helping everyday Americans.
All right, thank you so much to USCCA for making this content possible, but let's dive in to how China is lecturing us on human rights violations. This is the same country, by the way, where Mao Zedong said, "Power comes from the barrel of a gun," and 60 million Chinese died. It's historical fact. It happened in the last century. This is something you can look up, but let's get into it because the irony, it never ends when socialist and communist regimes push their agenda despite all historical record. Anyway, let's get going. China blames U.S. gun policies for global violence, says America exports woes and instability. Interesting, China. I hear you. I disagree wholeheartedly, particularly all the existing human rights violations China is in fault for, particularly all the history of human rights violations that China is guilty of, and all the other things that we can't really say on this channel, other than the whole Mao Zedong, power of the barrel of a gun, 60 million Chinese dead at the hands of their own government. But I digress. Let's keep going, because I want to hear more about how this is going to help us. America's loose management of firearms is creating a recurring nightmare of domestic gun violence that is now spilling into other countries. U.S.-made weapons and ammunition are increasingly finding their way into the wrong hands. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said Thursday. Well, I'm glad you're here. Worry about your own crap. The big thing here is, and of course this is extremely ironic as I've hit going into this video, we're being lectured by people who have very different understandings of human rights in the United States for the Second Amendment right, which their own people don't have. And there's rights and protest or fights and protests going on for the rights that we have in this country. But no, China feels the need to lecture us on our rights. Let's keep going. Again, please see history. Wang Wenbin, a spokesman for the ministry, lamented that at the United Nations meeting last week, the U.S. opposed a Chinese proposal to block transfers of ammunition to non-state actors. He then argued that America's tolerance for guns is creating violence around the globe. Yeah. Okay. There's pretty much two main styles. There's the Western and Eastern style of firearm distribution across the entire planet. You guys can figure out what it is in different regions. You know the history here. But again, for China to tell us that we have a violence problem with all the things that are going on right now in China around human rights, it's not only laughable, it's a little insulting. This is why we have the Second Amendment. This is why we have a First Amendment. This is why we have the Bill of Rights, so that we can keep the government in check from a civilian level. They work for us, we don't work for them, unlike the Chinese government, in which you belong to the state. Everything you produce belongs to the state. You are part of a upgraded communist system, which merges capitalism and communism. Rights are no part of the picture in China. Look at the last 2 to 3 years as current examples. But let's keep going. Oh, goodness gracious. Quote, gun violence has become a recurring nightmare for the American people, Wang said. The U.S.'s loose management of small arms and light weapons and ammunition, massive weapons export, and persistent transfer of military articles to non-state actors are equally worrying. Now, the irony here is China is talking about Ukraine and the United States and how they are supplementing along with all the other NATO nations. So, an ally of Russia is using the Second Amendment and our culture of firearms and of freedom to drive a point home about not arming Ukraine, which would then help a Russian ally. Anyone else seeing the writing on the wall here? We're just kind of a punching bag and a useful tool. Let's keep going. I got one more thing for you. This is delicious. Wang said that gun violence is increasingly America's main export to the world. Not freedom, not democracy, not representative democracy, not anything of human rights, because we're pretty much the only constitution in the entire planet that has the level of freedoms that we have. No, that's not our export. Our export is gun violence. This almost sounds like a left-wing article, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Quote, the U.S. brings to other countries not democracy or progress of human rights, but livelihood woes and instability, he said. The U.S. needs to know that the more it engages in such exports, the worse the backfire will be on the U.S. itself. That sounds a little bit like a threat. We'll just bypass that one. But democracy or progress of human rights. Again, this is the same country that in the 20th century, 60 million people died at the hands of their own government in what was called the Great Leap Forward. You abandon the old ways, you go now, or you are just pretty much terminated. Yeah, our human rights are the problem. That's what I've got for you. I figure you guys could use a nice little laugh for this beautiful Monday, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you so much. See you then.